The Hueycoatl, or Huey, the boss aimed at mid-game groups that drops mid-game items. Yet many argue it feels out of place, and some straight up say it's the worst designed boss in the game. Now I wouldn't go that far, but it certainly has its issues. Why? What's wrong with it? What are some good things? Let's explore. Let's address the elephant in the room, or the feathered serpent on the mountain, or unfortunately rather the weird lizard on the hill. Because it ended up as such, even though Jagex hyped it up to be so much more. Originally, it was pitched as this epic multi-stage journey trekking up a huge mountain. This mountain is inhabited by the Hueycoatl, occupying the tunnels of the mountain, and the beast could appear anywhere, anytime. We would fight different slithering body parts of this massive, fearsome feathered serpent, mind you, that has massive claws as documented in game, that we never actually see, along the journey to the top, where we would eventually reach the summit of the Dark Frost, where we need to face the weakened beast head-on, accompanied by a trusty dwarf brigade fighting alongside us. Instead, we got a two-stage encounter of whacking a few holes at the base of the mountain to casually strolling up a small hill where we hit a monster that's kind of a dragon, officially at least by category, but at the same time kind of something else, because it does not look like the other dragons in the game, while a dwarf dressed in robes is shouting at us, doing absolutely nothing else. Like, look at this. Would you even call this a mountain? Well, that's a trick question, because this is not the supposed mountain Huey lives on/in, this is the Proud Spire. The only purpose of this mountain is to have a single clue step and to absolutely mog on the Dark Frost. Now this is the Dark Frost, the quote-unquote mountain Huey lives on/in. Like, Jagex actually added this mountain to the game with no purpose, to then put the legendary mountain beast on a hill half its size. Imagine coming here as a new player, gearing up for this boss that you saw in a video or the wiki. You walk here, you look up this mountain, you try to find the boss, only to realize that it's on the other baby mountain next to you. Otherwise, the concept and the boss itself looks amazing. I love the whole Varlamore theme, I love the serpent living in the mountain. It's the scale that I have issues with. This fight could have been a true epic open world mass or team encounter, something like a Guild Wars 2 meta event. If you're not familiar with Guild Wars 2, the world is split into separate maps, and each map has its own ticking clock or trigger condition that starts a map-wide event chain connecting to the map's overarching story. These meta events can rarely be soloed, and players often organize groups or raids to complete them, but in some cases a ragtag of random players can push through, although a lot slower, with a huge chance of failing the event. Most of the time, these trigger event chains culminate in a champion or legendary difficulty boss fight, which gives the bulk of the loot. There are a ton of great examples from Guild Wars 2 that could work for the Hueycoatl encounter, of course, this time on an actually smaller scale, as Guild Wars 2 meta event chains can often take 30 minutes to an hour to finish sometimes. Now, we need to find the middle ground here. One example I would like to present is one of the original meta events in the game, all the way from vanilla Guild Wars 2 from 2012, is called Hueycoatl the Sunless. Now, did I subconsciously think of this first because Hueycoatl sounds similar to Hueycoatl? Yes. Did I also think of this because he's also a dragon? Well, also yes. But it's a truly amazing fight that you can encounter in a leveling zone. As a new player leveling your first character, you can actually naturally stumble on hundreds of players fighting this massive dragon. How cool is that? And the most important thing is that nobody can criticize the scale of this boss battle, unlike our dear Hueycoatl. Now, let's say goodbye to Guild Wars 2's meta event system and return to the place in old school RuneScape that could have taken some inspiration from it. We discussed scale, let's see the mechanics of this dragon, serpent, lizard, reptile thing. In the first phase, you're hitting, well, holes in the wall, a stationary object while flicking the correct prayers and dodging signs on the ground. Hitting a hole in the mountain feels weird, no feedback, it makes your attacks feel weightless. The introductory mechanics are okay, nothing groundbreaking, but good for teaching players easing into PvM. Move to avoid damage, pray to avoid damage, click to hurt the boss. Simple. Once you defeat all parts of the body in the holes, the way to the top opens. You can just walk right up a small slope. Huey awaits you and you can start hitting her. The mechanics are the same as before, but now instead of hitting stationary holes in the wall, you're hitting a stationary dragon halfway out of a hole. It still feels somehow off, feels like you're punching a statue. In teams of 3 or more, there is another mechanic, the pillars. If all 3 protection prayers are sufficiently represented when the shouting dwarf in robes checks for them, players get a 30% damage buff. Of course, you need to pay attention to protect against falling rocks too, so you essentially have to baby prayer flick a little bit to avoid damage while keeping the buff up. This pillar mechanic makes small group play better over soloing and rewards coordination. Of course, in trios, there's little to coordinate as you each pray something different, but it gets interesting in masses. Once the boss reaches 50% health, she shields herself and she will start slapping you with her tail. This wonderful phase gave us one of the worst telegraphed wave mechanics in the game. You pretty much need to learn the timing and the positioning to dodge it instead of focusing on the visuals, especially for mid-game players who are the target audience of this encounter. This feels bad. You either eat the damage or you manage to dodge it, but you're not sure why. Of course, you might say skill issue, learn to play, but this is supposed to be where players learn to play. However, this particular slow, weird wave animation is not seen in the game anywhere. Content aimed at later in the progression, such as Yama, has much clearer telegraphed wave mechanics that you can dodge without an issue even on your first attempt if you pay attention. Mid-game players, good luck guessing which of these waves actually damages you, how fast it moves, as it does move faster than its animation suggests, and since this is a radial wave originating from one single point, good luck figuring out the path it moves on. Okay, sure, but the rest of the phase must be better, right? Well, not really. You're hitting a stationary hole in the wall again, without feedback, but this time your damage is artificially reduced, God knows why. The tail will repeat the wave every time it switches sides, just follow these 2 tiles with this specific timing to dodge it. Why? We're not gonna tell you. Once you kill the tail, you're on to the last phase. The head is vulnerable again. Now every mechanic comes at you at once. You hit the boss, you dodge the signs on the ground, you dodge the waves, you pray correctly against the rocks, otherwise pray something else than most other players. Congratulations, you killed the fearsome Hueycoatl, the beast of legend, on her tiny hill. Let's see what loot you got. What? A subscribe button? That's weird. Anyway, let's introduce the drop table. Given that Huey is a group boss that can be soloed, every drop is split between the players according to their damage dealt, and this is how the unique roll works as well. The base unique roll chance is multiplied by your contribution percent to end up at the real chance at receiving a unique. For example, going by the original unique table, you had a 1 in 23 chance to roll the table, but if you killed Huey on a mass world with, let's say, 9 other people, assuming you all dealt equal damage, your real chance at rolling the unique table was 1 in 23 times 10%, so 1 in 230. Of course, this encouraged players to play in smaller groups or even solo, but the original rewards were hardly worth the effort. Huey only dropped 1 hide at a time, needed to craft a ranged armor set. You needed 8 to craft a full set of armor, which was only a marginal upgrade above Blessed D-Hide, which is already a kind of small upgrade over the regular Black D-Hide, which is dirt cheap and easy to get. The Dragon Hunter wand was so rare and so far behind the other Dragonbane weapons that it was practically useless and not worth grinding for, and it also couldn't auto-cast ancient magic, to at least be useful for barraging Slayer. The standard loot is seeds, alkables, runes, and other skilling materials. The amount is split depending on contribution. Huey's loot was so bad, it needed to be buffed 3 times. First, the standard loot was buffed, replacing lower tier alkables with better ones. doubled the quantity of the standard loot in general, and soil pages were moved to the standard loot table instead of taking away chance from uniques as it was originally released. Then, 2 weeks later, the soil pages and the Hueycoatl hides were buffed in rate dramatically. Pages were buffed from 1 to 30 at a time at 1 in 22 to 30 to 80 at a time at 1 in 13.6. Hides were buffed from 1 at a time at 1 in 70 to 2 to 3 at a time at 1 in 34.5. Then, 8 months later, the Dragon Hunter wand was actually made viable as a weapon, its drop rate got doubled, the unique table itself got more common to roll, and hides now always drop in 3s as well as being more common. The wand is actually pretty good today for what it is, but the rewards still feel off given Huey's place in the boss progression ladder. Let's see the situation. It is clearly aimed at mid-level players, given the simple move or prey mechanic and the fact that failing these mechanics is very forgiving. The armor set crafted from the hides is not really at a spot where it's an upgrade, given that their Perilous Moons gear, namely the Blood Moon set, is perfect for efficiently killing the boss. While getting the Blood Moon set, players are likely to pick up pieces of the Eclipse Moon set as well, which has better offensive stats than the Huey hide pieces. The Tome is used to enhance offensive earth spells, mostly used by early game accounts without proper combat stats and gear. Again, doesn't really fit into the progression. It doesn't help that the other elemental tomes in the game, the Tome of Fire and Tome of Water, are acquired through skilling bosses, which allows you to get them whenever you'd like, regardless of your combat level or your gear progression, to aid in early combat. Initially, there was a lot of confusion as to why Jagex decided to put the Tome of Earth on a PvM boss instead of a potential other skilling boss, and players suggested doing that instead, but for some reason Jagex was adamant about this. The Dragon Hunter wand is the most useful unique drop of the Hueycoatl without question. Especially after the buff, it's a decent weapon, it's the mage piece of the Dragonbane weapon arsenal, and probably the only item that's worth actively grinding for if you decide. If you decide to mage draconic creatures, it's up there with the general best in slot mage items, and it's a nice 10% mage damage one-handed wand for barraging Slayer's task now, as it can auto cast ancient magics since the latest update it received. It carved out its place in the meta, in my opinion, decently well, so I have nothing bad to say about it. Good job, Dragon Hunter wand. However, in my opinion, this single drop is not worth it alone to grind this boss.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
Given the length of kill times at mid-level and mid-gear, even with small teams. The pet is cool though, so lots of cloggers and pet hunters gather at Huey to, well, clog and pet hunt. However, at this point people do care about the efficiency close to max gear, and melee just surpasses mage by quite a bit, so the Dragon Hunter wand and Tome of Earth, 2 items Huey drops and she's handcrafted to be weak against, are thrown out the window. So here we are. The Hueycoatl was hyped up massively, then under-delivered in scale and fantasy. It could have been a truly epic, multi-phase open-world fight, working our way up a mountain. The funny thing is, you can actually currently see others fight the boss from the outside, like it's not an instance. Therefore, it's not an engine limitation, it could have been easily a working world boss. Some mechanics are good, while some are weird or get frustrating after a while, and even after multiple overviews of the drop table, it sits at a weird place on the progression ladder, only dropping 1 item that's semi-useful at the level you can farm the boss at, and because of that, it's now mostly a pet hunting playground. But in the end, only one question remains. Jagex, why didn't you put the boss on that mountain? What the f***?